Hello everyone, this is Tom Fox. In this special 5-part podcast series, we are considering the presidents of the Republic of Texas and leadership lessons we may draw therefrom. In this episode, we conclude our series with a look at Hanson Jones, the final president of the Republic of Texas who led to annexation. Don Frazier for our final podcast on the series of presidents of the Republic of Texas. We're going to conclude with the final president, Hanson Jones. Don, first of all, welcome back.
Thank you. I like talking Texas with you.
So Hanson Jones was a really interesting character. He came from Massachusetts, and he was a licensed physician, and that had some implications a little bit later in his life, but he supported the Sam Houston faction over the Mirabeau B. Lamar faction, and the annexation of Texas became official after he became president in January of 1846. How would you assess the short tenure of Hanson Jones?
He was the closer. Sam Houston set it up, and he was the closer. Now, what's interesting about Hanson Jones and annexation in particular is that he was really pushing for annexation early in the first Houston administration as minister to the United States, but then he was told to withdraw the. And so he has been essentially carrying this water for a decade, and he's watched it all develop. He's had several posts within the governments of Texas, and so when it comes time to seal the deal, Sam Houston throws it over to Hanson Jones. Now, Hanson Jones doesn't become president unopposed. There's just a lot of people that either die or kill him. So he ends up being the last guy standing, and Sam Houston's going, that's who should have won anyway. Conspiracy theorists can do what they want to with that. He committed suicide, you say. Hanson Jones is the president, and all he has to do is keep his hand on the tiller and steady the boat, sail the craft that Sam Houston has created. And he does it. And he does it very well. He does it diplomatically. He manages all the factions in Texas to where you got Houstonites and Lamar people all on the same team. Hey, he's brilliant. He is absolutely the guy for the job at that particular point. Had Lamar come back into the presidency, but there's no telling how he might have queered the deal. So I think as far as a president goes, he's not known for much because he wasn't president for long. But he was a smart guy, a tireless public servant, and did what needed to be done.
There was a couple of achievements he had as president that I wanted to highlight because they're a little bit outside the ordinary. The first one we have talked about before, and that was education.
Sure.
Because he endowed a university.
He did.
What can you say about his desire to have secondary education in the state of Texas?
Well, Lamar gets the ball rolling with all the school kids and then kind of leapfrogs over to disseminating knowledge to the general public. But sooner or later, you're going to have a flagship institution, and that institution of higher learning is Hanson Jones's project. So he understands that if land will work as a way to finance public education, it'll certainly work to finance a public university, higher education. And so that's his setup. The thing that Texas has is miles and miles of miles, and you might as well put it to work.
And the other thing I found interesting was he continued his medical practice throughout this time, and he actually set up medical standards throughout the state.
He did. So it can't just be quackery. There's absolutely standards that are going to come in. There's essentially a big controversy at the time period on exactly who gets to certify who as a doctor. And Hanson Jones is an MD adherent. You have to have some sort of examination, and you have to prove yourself competent. But at the same time, you have the Thompsonian school that's kicking around, and those are the people that are coming up, essentially root doctors, and they're coming up with medicines that they patent, hence patent medicines. And so those guys are essentially working out of the kitchen garden, whereas the medical guys, the MDs, are all saying you need to go to medical school and you need to have medical standards. There's another guy that's kicking around at the same time. Actually, there's several people that have come into the Republic about this time that are going to medical school in places like Paris. So medicine in Texas has this sort of injection of professionalism early on. You'd think it'd be just shin plasters and stump water, but no, it's actually fairly sophisticated for its time.
And you'd mentioned in the last podcast, I believe, about the immigration from Germany.
Yeah.
Did that accelerate up to the failed revolution of 1848 in Germany, or was it steady?
It started off steady. The 1848 revolutions in Europe accelerated it. And so there's a lot of people that are getting the heck out of Europe. So that immigration, that next pulse, is really getting over here late 48, 49, 50. And that is where you get some of the more interesting German folks that are moving into places like Comfort. These are the free thinkers. And these are people that are coming in with ideas that are fairly distrustful of big government, church, things like that. The original adopters are German immigrants coming into places like New Braunfels and Fredericksburg are a little more traditional. So not all Germans are created equal in Texas. Some are this way and some are that way. Alsatian immigrants also come in. Alsace is a borderland between Germany and France. And so you can't figure out which flag to salute any given day, so you come to Texas and start over. So places like Castroville pick up. It's in the early 1850s that Charles Schreiner comes. So you have that immigration, Czech immigration, Polish immigration. There's a big Polish community that starts essentially what becomes Bandera. And so there's a lot of people that see Texas as the great potential, especially after annexation. Not only European immigration, but also immigration from the Deep South. And the people that are sitting it out are all those entrepreneurs. They're looking at it going, oh man, the ports are all crummy, the water's too shallow, there's no fast water down there to propel our machines. And pretty quickly, the immigration that comes in right after annexation essentially swamps everybody else, and that's immigration from the Deep South.
So as we look back over the presidents of the Republic of Texas, we see certain ebbs and flows, and I guess I wanted to maybe end with, was each a man for his times, or was it really just more reactionary? One party gets one term, and then the other party gets the other term, and they try to muddle through or undo what the other one did and move forward?
I think it's competing visions. You know, what exactly is Texas? It's a great idea, but the devil's always in the details. And so they're men of their time. And I think that time was extraordinarily complex. America was becoming. Texas was becoming. Mexico was a throwback to the old country. And its inability to itself out just proved the superiority of this American vision. So does that American vision point to annexation and being part of the American machine? Or is that American vision, y'all did a nice job of setting up the precedent, now we'll take that precedent and we'll apply it ourselves? Lamar. They're all expansionists, and they're all pretty convinced that they have the right vision. And Great Britain, those guys are backwards. Rich, powerful, they're still dodgy. Mexico, there's no hope for Mexico. There's just no way to sort Mexico out. So we will treat them with respect because they're big, they're powerful, their army's impressive, but they're never going to get it straight. Americanism is in full flourish. The question is, what does that small r republicanism, what does that big A Americanism look like in a Texas context? And so all the presidents were right. All the presidents were expressing what they understood that American experience to be. Some just put a different emphasis on a different syllable, as they say. So that's my take on it.
I'd like to end with maybe a few thoughts on the importance of education.
Sure.
And Mirabeau B. Lamar, we've talked about what he did to set up the school system for the state of Texas, or at least put it in a position where it could be set up in the future. We talked about Anson Jones and endowing a university. Why is it in the American or Texas experience that education of literally everyone was so important?
Because knowledge is power. The more people that you can get educated, the better they'll be able to keep the republic. That goes back to Franklin. It's a republic if you can keep it. Now, we say that's important. They set up the cornerstones. They laid the foundations, but it really doesn't start to pick up momentum until 50, 60, 70, 100 years later. And so it's not until you get into the 1920s, that you have state and increasingly consolidated state control over public education in Texas. You get some universities established. You get UT, you get A&M, you get some other schools that they kick around. Finally, Texas Tech gets put up in the middle of the prairie in the Llano Estacado. So there is that sort of trend, but when you take it all the way down to the public school level, there's lots of places where you still can't get educated in Texas into the 20th century. There was attempts at putting rural schools out there. A lot of times these schools are managed by county judges, and so it's not really until the 20s and really not till 1949 that you get things like the Texas Education Agency fully invested in crafting how education is delivered across the state of Texas. So everybody points back to, Texas was keen on education, keen on talking about, but getting it implemented has always been the hard part.
Execution is where rubber meets the road.
That's right, execution. It's always about the execution.
Don, I wanted to thank you again for taking the time to visit with me. This has been a ton of fun, and I look forward to continuing this conversation.
Yeah, I look forward to future adventures with you. Thanks.
This is Tom Fox again. I hope you've enjoyed this special 5-part podcast series on presidents of the Republic of Texas and leadership lessons learned from them. It was a ton of fun creating it with Don Frazier, and I hope you'll check out the Texas Center at Schreiner Institute.